Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the new Dell XPS 13. This is a laptop that is priced near the MacBook Neo's price point, but offers more from a feature standpoint. And I was very impressed with what Dell is packing in for the price, especially given the current situation with the cost of electronics. So we're going to dive into this laptop and see what it's all about in just a second, but I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that this is on loan from Dell. So when we're done with this, it goes back to them. This is not a sponsored review. All of the opinions that you're about to hear are my own, and they have not reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what this laptop is all about. Now, the price point on this on the entry-level model is $699. They have a student price for $599. That is the same price point that you would get with the MacBook Neo. And as you'll see in a few minutes, this does have a few more things that the MacBook Neo doesn't have for the same price. Now, the one they sent me is the 16 gigabyte model, which does cost $200 more, either as a civilian or as a student. But this is the one I would suggest you go with, just because 16 gigabytes of RAM these days is, I think, a better place to start versus 8. The 8 will work, but this will give you a little better performance when you are doing a lot of multitasking or running apps like video editing or games that might require more memory. So I would suggest spending a little bit more to get to that point. And of course, the MacBook Neo doesn't offer 16 gigabytes as an option. You have to go up to the MacBook Air. So what you've got here is something pretty decent for less than $1,000. So why is it decent? Well, the build quality on it is spectacular. It is all metal. It is very lightweight. It comes in at around 2.2 pounds, or almost exactly 1 kilogram. It's got a very nice industrial design here. I can lift up the lid without having to hold down the base of it. It is a touch display at all SKUs, and it's a matte touch display as well, so it looks really good. It is a 13-inch display, as its 13 branding might give you a hint on, and it has a 2560 by 1600 resolution. It's an IPS display, so it's not OLED. It offers a variable refresh rate between 30 and 120 hertz, and this is important for power efficiency, because when it's sitting idle here, it can run at a lower screen refresh rate and consume less power. So it is nice to see that feature at a lower end price point, but when you need it, you've got a very snappy and responsive display that can run it up to 120 hertz. So it will look a lot nicer than the 60 hertz display on the MacBook Neo. And the display is pretty bright as well. It runs at 500 nits. It supports HDR and Dolby Vision if your favorite movie app supports that. So a nice package overall here for content consumption and just doing basic work. Now inside, it has an Intel Core 5 320 processor. This is one of the Intel Wild Lake processors, which are designed to cost less and consume less power, but still deliver adequate performance. And as you'll see in a few minutes, it does seem to hold up quite well, doing the types of tasks you would use this laptop for. As I mentioned, this one has 16 gigabytes of memory. It is LPDDR5X RAM on both the 8 and 16 gig configuration. As you might expect, that RAM is soldered onto the motherboard, so you can't upgrade it, but the SSD inside can be upgraded. This one comes with a 512 gigabyte SSD, which looks to be what the base model offers as well. And in comparison, the MacBook Neo starts off with a 256 gigabyte drive on its base level. Now, I really like the keyboard on this one. The keys are large and well spaced. For a very thin laptop here, there is more travel than you would expect, so you get a nice tactile feel to it. But I could really get going on this keyboard without having to adjust to it, which was really nice to see. And unlike the MacBook Neo, this one is backlit, so when you're in a dark environment, you can see your keys. The trackpad isn't bad either. This is not a haptic trackpad. It is a mechanical one, so you can't click up at the top here, but it does track quite well, and it feels very, very nice with decent travel and mechanical feedback on it. So that was good. There is no fingerprint reader on this, but there is, of course, the ability to use facial recognition on the webcam up top. There is no shutter for the webcam, so if you are concerned about that, you'll need to cover it up manually. The quality of the webcam isn't spectacular. This is a 1080p 30 frames per second image that it can capture at the maximum, and even under decent light it looked a bit grainy to my eyes, so not the best webcam in the world, but it's adequate for doing Zoom calls or whatever. And I was really impressed with the speakers on this. A lot of times when you get a small laptop like this, it's tinny and it doesn't sound very good. This one has a nice depth of sound that extends far beyond where the laptop might be sitting on your desk, so it sounds pretty good. Of course, headphones will always be better, but the speakers built in will surprise you not only with their volume level, but also the quality of the sound that it outputs. It definitely has a premium feel to it. There is not, though, much for ports on this, so you've got a USB-C port on the left-hand side here and another on the right-hand side. These are both USB Type-C 10 gigabit per second ports. They do not support Thunderbolt. There's apparently a higher end model that does have Thunderbolt on both sides, but these are the lower speed USB ports. But both of these ports are full service, so they can send video out to a monitor. They can also bring power in to charge the device, and of course it works with data devices as well. So limited port selection, but that's typically what you see on one of these devices. And of course, the MacBook Neo has 2 ports, but only on one side of the device. Now this has Wi-Fi 7 built in, so if you have a newer access point, it will take full advantage of that. And if you are on a clear access point like I am, where there's not any real activity going on at the moment, you will regularly see download and upload speeds around the 800 megabit per second range. I've seen faster out of some of these newer devices, but I think this is certainly more than adequate for the types of things that people might do with a laptop like this. So decent network connectivity built in, along with decent performance. And speaking of performance, why don't we run through a few scenarios and see how it performs. All right, so we'll begin with our basic web browsing task here. We'll boot up the Brave browser and head over to the nasa.gov homepage and see how it performs. And as you can see, it boots up very quickly here off of our Wi-Fi 7 access point. No real lag or delay, and you're able to look at very media-rich websites here without much of an issue. So if you're doing any kind of web application work, I think this is going to be fine for that, especially if you're going to college with this laptop. We also ran some YouTube tests on it earlier. I did my 4K 60 YouTube video test from my YouTube channel, and I did not see any drop frames after a few that popped up initially, so it should be able to keep up with any video that you throw at it from YouTube or Netflix or any of the other popular streaming apps. And on the BrowserBench.org speedometer benchmark test, we got a score of 30.9, and that is a little below the MacBook Neo, but it does certainly hold up with 2 more power-consuming Intel processors on devices that we've looked at recently. Now, as far as battery life is concerned on this, if you're sticking to the basics, you will be able to get 10 to 12 hours out of it, provided you keep the display brightness down a little bit and that variable refresh rate is enabled. That will get you the maximum battery longevity for doing basic work tasks on it. If you are doing more extreme things like video editing or gaming, that of course will impact battery longevity. But overall, I think you can easily get through a day doing a mixture of activities on this without having to worry about plugging it in. And it does charge up pretty quick when it's attached to its USB-C power supply. A little bit earlier, I did some video editing on this. This is DaVinci Resolve running with a 4K 60 video project. As you can see here, we're able to do basic cuts and transitions without any lag that I could detect. So for basic video editing, like doing some home movie edits or whatever, this is fine. Of course, for professional work, it won't hold up very well on that. So for example, if you drop in one of the video effects here, it does take it quite a while for it to render that, just because the onboard GPU is not up to the performance that you would see on a dedicated editing system. But still, for basics, it is just fine and on par with its competitors in the marketplace. Now, as far as gaming is concerned, I found it to perform pretty well for casual players. This is Cyberpunk 2077, a AAA title. I'm running it at 1080p at the lowest settings, and I was getting between 25 and 30 frames per second most of the time. That's not great for this game, but for the hardware, I think it's fine. And of course, if we were to turn the resolution down to 720p, we could easily keep it at around a consistent 30 frames per second, which again, for casual purposes, is fine. And of course, there are a lot of older games out there that perform really well on this hardware, so there is plenty to keep yourself entertained with on it. Just keep your expectations in check for the AAA titles. But one of the advantages, I think, of the Steam Deck entering the marketplace is that many developers now are optimizing for the low end and the high end, and this game's a great example of what you can squeeze into hardware that is designed for efficiency. So let's take a look at a couple of gaming benchmarks now. The first one is the 3D Mark Time Spy. There we got a score of 1,635, and compare that to the Asus VivoBook S14. That came out about a year or so ago at around the same price point before component prices shot through the roof. And I often wonder what we would get at this price point today had component prices not shot through the roof during this AI bubble. So hopefully when things come back down to earth, we'll be getting some very good performance packed into low price points, but not right now. Let's take a look at another benchmark. This is the 3D Mark Wildlife Test. Here we're able to compare to the MacBook Neo directly, as that device can run this test as well. And you can see the MacBook Neo does edge out the XPS 13 a bit when it comes to graphical performance. But of course, on the flip side, there are many more games available on the Windows side than there are on the Mac side. So you do have some performance advantages with the Mac, but certainly a much broader library of games on the XPS 13 here. But how does it do under load? Well, we did run the 3D Mark stress test on it, and here we got a passing grade of 98.6%. The temperature of the processor was at 53 degrees Celsius or 127.4 degrees Fahrenheit at the conclusion of that test, which means it keeps itself cool and it stays consistent throughout, even when you're doing some heavy-duty workloads on it. Now, this does have a fan built in, but you never really hear it. It is super quiet, so it's pretty impressive that they were able to keep the thermals so well balanced on this without making a lot of fan noise in a small package. I'm really impressed with what Dell has put together here. All right, one last thing to take a look at, and that is its Linux compatibility. We always boot up the most recent version of Ubuntu to see if it can load up a mainstream Linux distro, and it does load up here. The touch display does work, but I've got a couple of issues. One is audio is not working, and the Wi-Fi is not working, although the Bluetooth is working. So I suspect a driver update will get this fully functional on the Linux side, but it was able to boot up without any other issues. And I found, too, that when these new Intel chips hit the market, there's usually a couple of weeks where we have to wait for Ubuntu and some of these other distributions to catch up. So I do expect full Linux compatibility, but at the moment it is a bit limited in the sense that audio and Wi-Fi do not appear to be working. But overall, I found this to be an excellent device from Dell. A lot of value packed into this, especially given the current situation related to component prices. The build quality on this is exceptional. I would actually say it feels more premium than the MacBook Neo does. So I was very impressed with what they were able to pack in for this price point. Michael Dell did tweet out the other day that he expects prices on this model to go up at some point. So if you see it for a higher price later on, that is why the component issue catches up with everybody and it keeps getting more expensive. So if you are in the market, this might be a good time to pick up one of these devices. I think it's an excellent Windows laptop. That will do it for this one. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.